I thought it was a good weekend. Everyone was laughing. We grilled by the lake, played cards, told childhood stories. My sister even called me sis again, like she used to before Ryan. For once, I thought maybe, just maybe, we were healing. Then Sunday night, after everyone left, I checked my business account just to make sure the payment to my supplier had gone through. And there it was. $0 gone. Not a glitch. Not a transfer I forgot. $120,000 wiped clean. My hands went cold. My heart started racing. And then I saw it hit. My laptop had been moved. Security software I'd installed showed a login at 1:17 a.m. From inside the house. I called a family meeting the next morning. My voice was shaking, but I laid it all out. I didn't accuse anyone. I just asked who touched my laptop. No one flinched. Except Ryan. He leaned back in his chair, looked at me, dead in the eye, and said, "We needed it more than you." He smirked, like I was some stupid ATM. Like my 5 years of 18-hour shifts, saving every cent, building something from nothing meant absolutely nothing. And Lauren, my sister. She didn't defend me. She looked at the floor. And that silence was louder than any confession. That's when I knew. This wasn't just theft. It was betrayal. Signed, sealed, and served cold. My name is Sarah. And if you've ever trusted the wrong people with your life, I hope my story finds you in time. Before I share it all, can you say, listening in the comments, or tell me where you're watching from? And if this hits something inside you, please subscribe, because the next part gets even uglier. Thank you. Now let me tell you everything. My name is Sarah Thompson. I'm 34, and I live in Austin, Texas. 5 years ago, I opened a tiny boutique selling sustainable fashion Thompson designs. Back then, I had $5,000 to my name and a garage full of secondhand fabrics. Now I was days away from opening our second location in downtown Austin. My business account had $120,000 in it. That money wasn't a gift or an inheritance. It was scraped together from skipped dinners, 18-hour workdays, and sleeping under my work table. That number meant survival, growth, proof that I'd made it. And yet, as I zipped my suitcase for a weekend family reunion at Lake Travis, I didn't think about any of that. I was excited, nervous, hopeful, maybe a little too much. It had been years since we'd all been together like this, since Mom and Dad's funeral. This would be the first time since then that Lauren and I would sleep under the same roof again. Lauren, my little sister, beautiful, bold, chaotic Lauren. She and I couldn't have been more different. While I was the one saving up from babysitting gigs and summer jobs, she was getting detention for skipping class and blowing her allowance on clothes and impulsive trips. She dropped out of college to travel the world. I stayed home and stacked retail hours and stitched prototypes in my bedroom. When our parents died in that drunk driving accident, I was 25. Lauren was 21. We were each given $75,000 from their life insurance policies. I put mine straight into the boutique, everything, every cent. Lauren spent hers in under a year, new handbags, weekend resorts, and an unexplainable week in Las Vegas. That was where she met Ryan. He was charming in that fake slick way. Hair always slicked back, never without a Rolex on his wrist, always calling himself a real estate investor, though no one knew exactly what he invested in. The first time we met, he looked me up and down and said, "Cute shop you've got, but real money doesn't come from cotton and canvas." I smiled, but something in my gut curled tight. 6 months later, they were married. And Lauren, my firecracker of a sister, started fading. She stopped calling. Her messages became short, awkward. Her voice lowered any time she spoke in front of Ryan, and she started saying things like, "Let me check with him first. I knew something was wrong." But how do you say that without sounding like the jealous big sister? I didn't want to push her away, so I stayed quiet. I hoped secretly that this weekend might be the start of something better. So I powered down my laptop, checked the account one last time, shatched 124.37 and zipped my bag. I had no idea that by the end of that weekend, that number would be 0. And worse, that the ones who took it were sitting at the dinner table with me, smiling. I arrived at the lake house just after sunset Friday. The wooden steps creaked like they always had, and the air smelled like pine needles and sunscreen. I felt my chest tighten and loosen at once. Hannah, my cousin and longtime ally, opened the door. She smiled, but her eyes scanned behind me, like she wanted to say more but couldn't. They got here early, she said, lowering her voice. Lauren and Ryan, you should keep your laptop close. I laughed it off. She didn't. The living room was full of noise. Ryan was already holding a beer and wore one of those loud polo shirts that practically screamed, "I'm successful." He flashed his too white smile. "Sarah, did you bring those cute little dresses for the whole family to play dress up?" I smiled stiffly. "Just here to relax." Then, Lauren came out from the kitchen. She wrapped me in a hug. "Sis." The word hit my ears like it used to when we were kids. But her voice was thin eyes, darting, not to me, but to Ryan. Something in her touch felt rehearsed, like she was hugging out of obligation, not instinct. That night, during dinner, Ryan did what he always did, dominated the conversation. He talked about capital gains and leverage and a massive flip in Houston, like we were in a boardroom. Lauren barely spoke. She laughed when he laughed, and I sat there, swirling my wine, wondering when my sister became this shadow. Later, while everyone was outside roasting marshmallows, I stayed in to send a quick email to a supplier. That's when I noticed it. My laptop was wrong. Nothing dramatic, just the charging cable plugged into the wrong side. A tiny thing. But I'm meticulous. I would never plug it in like that. I opened the lid. The screen flashed and a notification popped up. Failed login attempt at 7:43 p.m. Location this device. I was in the kitchen with Aunt Susan at that time. I hadn't touched my laptop since that morning. My stomach dropped. I opened my security logs. A second alert, an attempted access from an unrecognized device. The IP matched the lake house's Wi-Fi. I didn't scream, didn't tell anyone. Instead, I changed every password, enabled two-factor authentication, downloaded the activity tracker I'd installed last year after a minor phishing scare. Then I tucked the laptop deep in my locked suitcase and sat on the bed, trying to control my breathing. Who in this house would have tried to access my bank account? It couldn't be Hannah. Aunt Susan. No way, Ryan. The thought made something inside me go rigid. He was always arrogant. But would he really? I stood, needed air. Walking down the hallway, I paused when I heard whispering. It was Ryan's voice, quiet but sharp. "Just don't say anything. We'll finish it before morning." I froze. No response from Lauren, just the squeak of the door closing. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The wind off the lake tapped branches against the windows. Somewhere, someone laughed. But inside my chest, there was only dread. Something was happening. Something quiet, calculated. And if I was right, it wasn't a stranger. It was someone who knew my name, my passwords, and who used to call me Sis. The next morning started like any other. I padded into the kitchen, barefoot hair still a mess, and reached for the kettle. The house was quiet, still smelling faintly of cinnamon pancakes from the day before. I poured water, waited for the boil, and pulled out my phone to check the morning emails. That's when it rang. Natalie's name flashed across the screen. My partner, my right hand at the boutique. She never called this early unless something was wrong. "Sarah," she said. Her voice was clipped, panicked. The payment to Kessler Fabrics bounced. "The system says the account is empty." The mug slipped from my hand and hit the counter with a dull thud. I didn't respond. I just ran barefoot, heart pounding, back to my room, grabbed my laptop, and yanked open the screen. I typed my credentials with shaking fingers. 0. 0 across both accounts, business and personal. I refreshed. Again, still 0. I opened the transaction history. There they were, 11 separate withdrawals between 11:42 p.m. and 4:15 a.m., all sent to an account I'd never seen before, a random string of letters and numbers ending in SVX. I couldn't breathe. My throat closed. The air felt thick, like the walls of the room were moving in on me. I stared at the screen, willing it to be a mistake, a glitch, a bad dream. But it was real. All of it. Every dollar I'd built, gone. And it hadn't just happened. It had happened while I was asleep in the same house as the people I'd grown up with. Someone under this roof had drained my life out of me, digit by digit, transfer by transfer, while I slept. I didn't cry. Not yet. I stood up, walked out of the room. My feet felt like stone. By the time I reached the kitchen, most of the family was awake. Aunt Susan was chopping fruit. Uncle Michael sipped his coffee on the porch. Hannah was scrolling through her phone. And at the kitchen island, like some smug king at the head of a wooden throne, sat Ryan, barefoot, in a shirt 2 buttons too open. I cleared my throat. I need everyone here. Now. They looked at me, startled by my tone. Something in my face must have said I wasn't joking, because within minutes, the entire family had gathered around the kitchen table. I didn't waste time. My bank accounts were emptied last night. $120,000 gone. 11 transfers made overnight from this house's Wi-Fi. Someone here did it. Silence. Not even the fridge dared to hum. I scanned the room. Everyone looked stunned. Everyone. Except Ryan. He leaned back, folding his arms behind his head, like this was a backyard barbecue. I zeroed in. I saw you near my laptop last night. Were you in my room? He tilted his head. That smirk, I'd seen it before, when he called my boutique cute like a lemonade stand. Relax, Sarah. No need for drama. We didn't steal it. We borrowed it. We needed it more than you. The words felt like someone punched me in the throat. Not a denial. Not even a weak excuse. Just a cold, entitled confession. Aunt Susan gasped. Hannah dropped her phone. Uncle Michael shot up from his chair, voice rising. Are you serious? You think that's acceptable? You think this is okay? Ryan shrugged. It's not like she can't make it back. She's always talking about how successful she is. I turned to Lauren. She didn't look at me. Her lips were trembling. You knew, I said. Tell me you didn't know. Lauren's voice was barely a whisper. He said, we'd put it back, that it was just temporary. I didn't know he'd actually. You knew, I said again, and you let him. My voice cracked, then not out of weakness, but fury so sharp I could barely contain it. My baby's sister, the person I would have taken a bullet for. And she stood by while her husband ripped out my spine. I pulled out my phone. I'm calling the police. Ryan stood so fast his chair screeched back. He lunged forward, grabbing for my arm. You don't want to do this. You don't know who you're messing with. His grip tightened. Panic flickered in his eyes for the first time. But before I could react, Uncle Michael shoved himself between us, pushing Ryan backward. Hannah reached out and pulled me behind her. And then, from outside, sirens. A squad car pulled into the driveway, lights flashing, brakes hissing against gravel. I hadn't even dialed yet, but someone had. Or maybe it was the bank. Didn't matter. They were here, and everything was about to unravel. The officers stepped into the house without hesitation, led by a tall, graying detective in plain clothes. He introduced himself with a calm but firm tone. Detective Carter. We've received a fraud alert from a banking institution regarding this address. We need to speak with Sarah Thompson. I raised my hand. That's me. Carter asked to see my laptop, and I led him down the hall without looking back at anyone. My heart felt like a ticking clock, loud and heavy, Back in my room, I opened my suitcase and pulled out the laptop. I didn't speak. I let the facts do the work. I launched the tracking software. The one I'd installed months ago, paranoid after a phishing attempt, nearly cost me my vendor contracts. Carter leaned in as I navigated through the logs. Keystrokes, screen captures, session histories. One image froze him in place. Ryan at 1:17 a.m., sitting at my desk, face lit by the glow of the screen hands poised over the keyboard. The system had snapped a picture every 2 minutes. He was in at least 8 of them. I didn't say a word. Carter simply nodded. That's enough. We walked back to the living room together. Carter made eye contact with officers and gestured toward Ryan. Mr. Ryan Wallace, you're under arrest for unauthorized access and theft. Ryan leapt to his feet. This is a setup. She's lying. She staged the whole thing. Carter didn't flinch. The software doesn't lie. The timestamps match the transfers exactly. The IP address is locked. You were caught, Mr. Wallace. The officers moved forward, but Ryan fought back with words. You want to know the whole truth? Ask Lauren. She knew. She was in on it. She agreed to it all. All heads turned towards Lauren. Her face went pale. She stepped backward, hand trembling against the kitchen counter. Tell them, Ryan barked. You told me it was okay? You said she'd never notice. I turned to her, but my voice died in my throat. Because she didn't deny it. She didn't say a word. Ryan spat on the floor as the cuffs clicked behind his back. He looked at Lauren one last time and sneered. You're nothing without me. Lauren's lips moved. Her voice cracked. If it weren't for you, I might have remembered who I was. The house went still. I saw her then. Not the woman who'd stood beside a thief. Not the stranger who kept secrets. But my little sister, age 17, curled on my bed, crying because she failed her math test and Dad had yelled too loudly. For a moment, she looked at me, not in fear, not in shame, but like she wanted me to reach for her again. I couldn't. Not yet. Ryan was escorted out, screaming until the car door shut. Silence returned. Lauren slumped into a chair, her head in her hands. No one moved. Not Uncle Michael, not Aunt Susan, not even Hannah. The damage wasn't just money. It was deeper, colder. Something inside me shattered, but another part one I hadn't needed until now began to harden. I didn't know where we go from here. But I knew one thing. The truth was out, and there was no putting it back. Ryan was gone, taken away in the back of a cruiser, but the silence he left behind clung to the walls. It didn't feel like an ending. It felt like the start of a much slower collapse. I sat in my room with my laptop open, but my eyes couldn't focus. My mind kept circling one question like a fly around a wound. How much did Lauren know? And if she knew, why didn't she stop it? I barely slept. I expected tears, but none came. Just that burning hollowness in my chest, the kind you get when something breaks and you know it can't be fixed. The next morning, I knocked on Lauren's door. No answer. I tried again louder. When I finally opened it, the bed was made, closet empty. Suitcase, gone. She'd left in the night. No note, no goodbye, just vanished. Hannah found me pacing the hallway. She probably couldn't face anyone. Maybe she's ashamed, she whispered, or afraid of what we'd ask her next. I didn't know if I was worried for Lauren or terrified of what she might still be hiding. Later that day, I met Detective Carter at the precinct. He handed me a preliminary report. His eyes never left mine. Ryan admitted to owing money, about $30,000 to a loan shark based in Dallas. Said he was being threatened. I nodded numbly. But that's not all, he continued. Over $80,000 was funneled into an offshore account tied to a Nevada shell company called Harvest Union LLC. It's untraceable, at least for now. I gripped the edge of the desk. That's everything. Not quite, he said, lowering his voice. He also claims Lauren knew about the plan, that she didn't stop it. No, I snapped. That's a lie. She wouldn't do that. I'm not saying she helped, he said gently, but she may have looked the other way. I left the station feeling weightless, like I'd left parts of myself inside. My limbs moved, but I was somewhere else, back in our childhood home, Lauren in the top bunk, asking me to tell her a bedtime story. Back when she still looked at me like I was her safe place. That night, Uncle Michael called for a family meeting. We sat in a circle in the living room, exhaustion hanging in the air like damp clothes. I told them everything. Susan cried quietly. Hannah just stared at the floor. And Uncle Michael always, the rock said, if she knew and did nothing, that's betrayal too. I shook my head. She was scared. Ryan controlled her. You don't understand what that's like. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed myself. Afterward, Hannah pulled me aside. There's something else, she whispered. Last month, Lauren asked to borrow $2,000. Said it was to help Ryan settle something urgent. I didn't think much of it. Until now. I closed my eyes. She knew. Maybe not the details, but enough. And she still came to the reunion. Still smiled. Still let me sit beside her at dinner while her husband dismantled everything I'd built. I didn't know if I wanted to scream or disappear. The next morning, I tracked down a friend who had once rented a temporary apartment to Lauren. She gave me an address, something Lauren had scribbled months ago just in case. I drove there in silence. When she opened the door, Lauren looked like a ghost-eyed swollen skin, pale hair, a tangled mess. She didn't try to pretend. Did you know? I asked. She nodded, once, a sharp, painful motion. Then her body crumbled. I knew, she whispered. I knew what he planned, but he said, if I warned you, he'd hurt you. He said he'd ruin you, or worse. I stared at her, like I didn't recognize her anymore. You're my sister, I said. You chose him over me. She dropped to the floor in sobs, and I walked away without another word. My legs gave out once I reached the car, and I sat there pressed against the steering wheel, unable to breathe. A week passed. I didn't go to the boutique. I didn't answer Natalie's messages. I didn't check the work schedule or vendor invoices. Every morning, I opened my bank app and stared at the balance. At $60,000, the amount the bank had managed to recover temporarily. It sat there like a cruel joke. Half a lifeline, half a reminder. The second boutique was on hold. No contractors, no launch, just silence and dust. I felt like a hollowed-out version of myself. Then, one day, Natalie walked into the apartment holding a plain envelope. This came for you, she said softly. Inside was a letter, handwritten, shaky, but unmistakably Lauren's. She wrote about everything, how Ryan had found out about her past, her gambling addiction, how she'd stolen from a previous employer and narrowly avoided charges, how he'd threatened to expose it if she didn't help him access my laptop. I froze, she wrote. I thought keeping quiet would keep you safe, but it made things worse. I lost you anyway. I read the letter twice, hands trembling. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't beg. She only said she missed me and that she hated who she'd become. I drove to her apartment. The door was unlocked, the place cleaned out. A neighbor told me she'd left the morning before with one small suitcase. She seemed sad, he said. Didn't say much. On the bathroom mirror, a single note was taped. I'm not good for you. I need to go before I pull you under again. It wasn't a goodbye. It was a confession, a surrender. And for the first time, I was scared not of betrayal, but of losing her completely. I called Hannah. I think she's in trouble. We filed a report, not as a missing person, but as someone at risk. Carter helped connect us with a local therapist who flagged a possible intake name matching Lauren's. A friend of a friend traced her to San Antonio. She was working part-time at a diner living in a room above it that smelled like mold and boiled onions. When I walked in, she froze. I sat across from her. I don't care what you did, I said. I care that you're still here. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just leaned forward and hugged me so tight it hurt. That night, I drove her back to Austin. No words about what came next. Just quiet. She slept in the guest room. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something loosen in my chest. I didn't know if I could ever trust her the same way again, but I knew I couldn't bear to live in a world where she didn't exist. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but it can be a beginning. That night, I opened a new notebook and began rewriting the business plan. Not because I knew it would work, but because I had to try again. Because even when everything is broken, you don't throw it all away. Not family, not dreams. You rebuild, even if it takes everything you've got. After bringing Lauren back to Austin, I made up the guest room for her. It wasn't much: a small bed, a lamp, a stack of fresh towels, but it was safety. It was a beginning. She barely spoke the first few days. Her words were short-clipped. Thanks. Sorry. Then, silence. But every evening, I left a cup of chamomile tea by her door. A soft good night. No pressure. Just presence. I knew I couldn't force healing. I could only offer space for it. One morning, I was answering emails when she stood in the doorway, hugging a hoodie to her chest. "Can you drive me to therapy today?" she asked. Just 8 words. But they carried the weight of 1,000 apologies. She cried through her first session 45 minutes straight. I sat in the car, waiting, unsure if she'd walk out the same girl who went in. When she did, her eyes were red, but lighter somehow, as if she'd finally let go of something she'd held too tight for too long. Meanwhile, the boutique wasn't going to rebuild itself. Natalie, ever the fighter, pitched a crowdfunding idea. At first, I resisted. I didn't want to ask people for money. I didn't want to share my humiliation. "Sarah," she told me, "you've spent your life lifting others. Let them lift you for once." So I sat down and wrote the post. I told the truth about the theft, the betrayal, and how I found my sister again in the wreckage. I hit publish, then closed the laptop, and tried not to think. Within 3 days, the donations rolled in. Over $40,000 from friends, former clients, strangers in the community who remembered my pop-ups at local fairs, my eco-sourcing workshops, or just resonated with the story. A local magazine picked it up. Then, a designer from Dallas emailed offering to sponsor the boutique's relaunch. I felt overwhelmed, but this time in the best way. Not by loss, but by hope. 2 weeks later, Carter called. His voice carried news I hadn't dared expect. "We've traced the offshore transfer. Turns out Ryan funneled the funds into a shell company in Nevada. The account's frozen now due to unrelated legal violations." I filed the necessary paperwork with my lawyer, and within another 14 days, $40,000 was returned to my account. I stared at the transfer confirmation like it was a miracle. Not the full amount, but enough to finish what I started. I invited the family to dinner at Uncle Michael's house. Susan brought her famous pot roast. Hannah made salad. Lauren arrived last, wearing a simple blouse, her hair pulled back, eyes downcast. When the air thickened, I stood up. "She made a mistake," I said, "but she's showing up. And if family means anything, it should mean we don't throw each other away." A pause. Then Uncle Michael gave a tired sigh. Susan wiped her eyes. Hannah smiled and pulled out the chair next to her. Lauren sat down slowly, like she didn't quite believe she was allowed to. Later that night, she and I washed dishes side by side. She sliced apples for the old family dessert, Mom's cinnamon apple compote, and for a moment, it felt like time folded back on itself. Everything wasn't perfect, but it was real. And real was more than enough. March arrived with sunlight that shimmered against the boutique's windows like liquid gold. The second location of Thompson Designs opened with a small crowd lining the sidewalk. People clapped, took pictures, held coffee cups, and wore smiles that reminded me how deeply stories could move people. Natalie stood beside me, wiping tears. "We did it," she whispered. I nodded, and lifted the scissors. With one clean snip, the ribbon fell. The crowd cheered, and in a reflection on the boutique glass, I saw a woman I almost didn't recognize, shoulders square, chin high, me, still standing. Inside, Lauren manned the front counter wearing one of my new summer designs, a soft linen wrap dress in warm coral. A customer leaned in. "Are you the owner?" She laughed gently. "No, my sister is. She's the reason this place exists. I'm just the lucky one who got a second chance." I didn't say anything. I just watched her work welcoming customers, offering fitting room keys, folding scarves with care. That night, she stayed up sketching by the window. "I want to apply for design school," she said. "Night classes, maybe. I want to learn for real this time." I poured her tea and placed it beside her sketchbook. "Do it," I said. "You don't need to be perfect. You just need to begin." We didn't talk about Ryan much anymore. But one morning, Carter called. Ryan had been sentenced to 6 years for theft, financial coercion, and cybercrimes. I read the official letter once, folded it neatly, and slid it into the back of a drawer. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I planned another gathering this time, at the old house on Lake Travis. But I didn't call it a reunion. It was a fresh start. We painted the walls. Pulled weeds hung white curtains that fluttered in the breeze. Lauren planted lavender by the porch. Di Susan baked the cinnamon waffles Mom used to make. Uncle Michael grilled burgers on the deck. And Hannah brought speakers to play old soul records. No one talked about the past. We just lived. As the sun dipped low and turned the lake pink, I felt it. That quiet knowing this wasn't about returning to what we were. It was about building something better from what was left. Later that week, I made one final post on the boutique's page. I lost everything once, and it nearly broke me. But I found my way back, not through revenge, but through rebuilding. If you're lost in your own night, borrow a bit of my morning. You deserve to begin again. The post went viral. But what mattered most was that Lauren saw it and smiled. One afternoon, I sat on the bench outside the boutique. The smell of linen and warm wood drifted out the door. Inside, Lauren helped a mother choose a graduation dress for her daughter. I closed my eyes, letting the Austin breeze brush my skin. There were no more perfect endings to wait for. This was enough. And it was real. Sometimes life doesn't shatter in a single moment. It cracks slowly along the lines we never thought to protect. And sometimes healing doesn't mean going back to how things were. It means building something new from pieces that learned how to survive. If this story stirred something in you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment, share your voice, and if you'd like to hear more, don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for being here.